Session.
Are you resuming in public session?
Okay, we are now resuming in public session, sitting as the Joint Committee on Public Oversight and Petitions. Consideration of petition number 40 of 2014, submitted by Mr Tony Rochford. We have before us today officials from the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government, and officials from the National Standards Authority of Ireland. I remind all of those present, including those in the public gallery, that mobile phones and Blackberries should be turned off completely or switched over to flight or safe mode because they interfere with the sound system, even if they are on silent. We're very pleased to welcome today from the National Standards Authority of Ireland, Mr Maurice Buckley, Chief Executive Officer, Ms Yvonne Wild, Manager in Standards, I hope I pronounced your surname, and from the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government, Sarah Neary, Senior Advisor, Eamon Smith, Engineering Advisor, and Martin Vaughan, Assistant Principal. You're very welcome. And I look forward to your presentations. Members will be aware that this issue arose out of a petition number 40 of 2014, which relates to, and it's headed, disease rates linked to central heating systems. The petitioner, Mr Tony Rochford, advises that since 2000, a large percentage of plumbers have started to use single-check, non-return valves to link a householder's central heating system, CHS, and fresh water supply. According to the petitioner, his research indicates that chemicals and bacteria are leaking into the householder's water supply. The petitioner was before the committee on 25th of March 2015 and was agreed to write to the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government and the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, seeking the implementation of Section 952 and 953 and 964 of the Draft Code of Practice as produced by the National Standards Authority of Ireland, and the Department's plans to introduce regulations or legislation to address properties which are possibly already affected by the issue. It was also agreed at that time to invite the National Standards Authority of Ireland and officials from the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government to appear before the Joint Committee in public session, as we are today. Our considerations here today centre on the establishment of regulations concerning the use of single-check non-return valves. Does regulation of the plumbing sector in Ireland exist? Have all EU directive standards regulations been transposed? What are the standards regulations that exist in Ireland and the EU in regard to ensuring no backflow contamination? Any related health concerns as identified by the petitioner will be addressed at a future meeting. We will have officials from relevant departments before us to address those issues. So in terms of parliamentary privilege, before commencing, I must inform you that by virtue of Section 1721 of the Defamation Act 2009, you are protected by absolute privilege in respect to the evidence you are to give to this committee. You are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter, and if you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. With the agreement of members, now invite Mr Grant to... Sorry, is that the right? Mr Buckley, sorry, I had the wrong name here, to make his presentation. Apologies, Mr Buckley.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, members. I'd like to thank the committee for the invitation to assist in your considerations of the issues raised in the petition regarding the installation of central heating systems and the ongoing standardisation work NSAI is undertaking in the area of plumbing services. This is my first occasion before this committee, and I'm accompanied by my colleague Yvonne Wild, Manager of Standards Technical with expertise in construction, and today we'll endeavour to address any matter raised by the committee. As the committee will also be addressed by the officials from the Department of the Environment, and since the Department and its agencies have statutory responsibility for water safety, water quality, building regulations and building standards generally, I will confine my comments to NSAI's role and our work in standardisation. I'm happy to take any questions from members, but before doing so, I would like to just take the opportunity to provide the committee with a little background information on the NSAI and the standardisation role, particular reference to the plumbing issue in question. So, NSAI, as the Irish national standards body, is responsible for developing technical specifications for products, for processes, for practices, in the form of written standards, guides, or codes of practice. Now, while there's some difference in character between these various documents, they're all collectively referred to as standards for the purposes of today's hearing. Standards are generally voluntary, but they can be made legally binding when they're referenced as mandatory by legislation. Of the 1,500 or so national, European and international standards that we in NSAI would publish annually, an increasing number are used to support legislation by providing the user with a means of demonstrating compliance with legal requirements through using the standard. This type of reference establishes the standard as the preferred route of compliance without it becoming in itself mandatory. In the absence of any legal reference, standards remain fully voluntary to be used by businesses as a means of demonstrating state-of-the-art or best practice. NSAI develops standards through its network of consultative committees. Committee members are drawn from industry, government and societal interest groups to work on matters of common interest, and it's NSAI's role to act as a facilitator for that process. There are currently 2 related consultative committees dealing with domestic heating and plumbing. So they are our Building Services Consultative Committee and our Water Supply Standards Consultative Committee. One is dealing with the Code of Practice for domestic hot water and heating, and the other is dealing with a similar Code of Practice for cold water systems. These committees currently comprise representatives from policymakers, regulators, manufacturers, trade associations, local authorities, academia, insurers, private water suppliers, consultants and installers. The 2 committees liaise through nominated members to ensure that there's no overlap between their work, no duplication, and the necessary cross-referencing can take place. There are normally 5 steps in the process of developing standards. Firstly, identifying the needs and the benefits of a standard. Then defining the scope, i.e. identify the technical, environmental or safety specifications which need to be set. Consultation with a view to achieving a consensus is a large part of the work. Then there's a process of public inquiry. And finally, there is the publication of the finished standard. As a member of the European and international standards organisations, NSAI can only undertake national standardisation work in the absence of suitable standards being published by these bodies, that is, the European or international bodies. Furthermore, in the interest of global and EU trade, NSAI is obliged to adopt such European or international standards as national standards and ensure any existing national publications are compatible with their content. So in all European member states, the regulation of supply of drinking water and the quality of drinking water are matters where the appropriate agencies and bodies are matters for the appropriate agencies and bodies charged with those responsibilities. It's well recognised and a fundamental design principle when designing, installing and maintaining water supply systems that potable water installations must be protected from contamination, e.g. through backflow from central heating systems, which is the issue in question today. Several Irish standards developed through the European system give guidance in relation to this issue, and these include a family of 5 parts of ISEN 806, which is concerned with the specifications for installation inside buildings conveying water for human consumption. And as I said, that standard is broken into 5 parts, developed over a time period from 2000 to the Part 5, which is published in 2012. Another standard, ISEN 12828 from 2012, with an annex in 2014, addresses heating systems in buildings and the design for water-based heating systems. And a further standard, ISEN 1717 from 2000, with a national annex published in 2011, deals with the protection against pollution of potable water in water installations and the general requirements of devices to prevent pollution by backflow. So, ISEN 12828 and ISEN 806 and the design of water and central heating systems implicitly recognise that drinking water supplies can be contaminated by backflow, and the standards specifically address methods for addressing these risks. Part 2 of ISEN 806 recognises the existence of national and local regulations and requirements and the need to prevent the contamination of water. The national annex to ISEN 1717, and I'm sorry for quoting all these numbers, but they are important, provides guidance regarding backflow prevention in Ireland, taking account of the low-pressure ventilated mains water systems. The guidance notes the practice of having an unrestricted air gap to protect the incoming water supply against backflow, unless otherwise expressly permitted in writing by the appropriate responsible water authority. In other cases, it recommends that a risk assessment be carried out according with the standard. So in terms of national work, in 2006, the need for an Irish Code of Practice for plumbers in general was identified to complement the then existing European standards, with the project beginning in earnest in 2008. This project was aimed at developing a best practice guide for the use by the trade by drawing together the references to relevant standards with useful explanations in an easily readable form. The project was supported by key stakeholders, including the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government and the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, who committed funds to support the necessary work. A first draft code of practice was published in 2010 for public comment, and this consultation was met with great interest, resulting in over 200 observations being submitted to the NSAI. The public inquiry draft in 2010 took account of relevant local authority bylaws available at that time. These local authorities in general required that water systems contain an adequate device or devices to prevent the occurrence of backflow. The draft code of practice drew together these requirements as best practice. Since then, following the 2010 public inquiry and further consideration, it was decided to split the very large draft standard at the time into two parts to enable work to proceed more efficiently. These two parts, as previously identified in conjunction with the committees, are titled SR 50 Part 1, relating to domestic hot water and heating, and SR 50 Part 3, relating to domestic plumbing for cold water systems. Due to the level of interest from the various groups involved and the prioritisation of other critical projects and availability of key stakeholder input and internal resources, work on the project was put on hold until being reactivated earlier this year. The most recent review has identified the need for further work to address technical developments, changes in building practices, availability of updated European standards in recent years, and related matters raised by harmonised standards under the EU Construction Products Regulation. Irish Water, which was established in the interim, is also now engaged as a key stakeholder. The projects are progressing well, and it's expected that drafts of both documents will be issued for public inquiry during 2016. As previously stated, standards are voluntary documents unless referenced as mandatory or as confirming a presumption of compliance through legislation. When the Code of Practice documents are published by NSAI, the relevant authorities may choose to reference them in whatever way they consider appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now ask Ms Neary to present.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and to the committee for the invitation to the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government to assist the committee in their deliberations on the matter raised in the petition. My name is Sarah Neary and I'm a Senior Technical Advisor in the Architecture and Building Standards section of the Department. I'm accompanied by Eamon Smith, Engineering Advisor, and Martin Vaughan, Assistant Principal. The subject before the committee is technical in nature, and the Department is happy to outline its understanding of the relevant product standards, technical guidelines and regulatory controls at home and abroad that inform consideration of this matter. I note that the National Standards Authority, who we've just heard from, has also accepted the committee's invitation and welcomed their participation in this discussion. It's important to note that with effect from January 1st, 2014, Irish Water assumed statutory responsibility for public water services under the Water Services Act. Irish Water is now the designated national authority with responsibility for water services, and the quality and integrity of water supply in general comes within the remit of Irish Water. As such, questions, if any, from the committee members on this aspect of the matter must be directed to Irish Water. So at the outset, it might be helpful to summarise the existing and proposed regulatory arrangements relative to the matters raised in the petition. The petitioner's issue relates to the installation of a sealed primary heating circuit as part of an indirect vented hot water system. His concerns focus on the method of filling the sealed circuit with water and the potential for backflow contamination. The sealed primary heating circuit is the pipework that goes from the boiler to a coil in the hot water cylinder. While sealed circuits have existed for some time in the industry and are used in many jurisdictions across Europe, they are relatively new in Ireland. Traditionally, hot water systems in Ireland have vented primary heating circuits, which effectively meant that there was a dedicated feed and expansion cistern for the boiler in the attic, along with the existing main cold water storage tank. For sealed primary heating circuits, the feed and expansion cistern for the boiler is redundant. The sealed system is fitted with an expansion vessel separately fitted to accommodate the increased volumes. In relation to the supply of feed to fill this circuit, a temporary connection is typically made to the mains water supply. British standards have dealt with these systems for some time. The current British standard is 8558. It's titled A Guide to Design, Installation, Testing and Maintenance of Services Supplying Water for Domestic Use Within Buildings and Their Curtilages, and its complementary guidance to the European Suite EN 806. This standard outlines the proper procedures for these sealed circuits. It sets out how the connection to the mains water supply may be made by providing a service valve, a temporary connecting pipe and an appropriate backflow prevention device. This arrangement presents some risk to the mains supply, and the petitioner rightfully refers to this. Normally, the pressure in a primary heating circuit is less than that of the mains supply pipe. However, if a fault occurs, say in a pressure relief valve within the system, for example, the pressure in the circuit could rise above that of the mains. In this case, and if the servicing valve is left in the open position and the backflow prevention device fails, then there is potential for backflow of the fluid in the heating circuit into the mains supply. This has the potential to cause contamination of the mains supply. For the avoidance of such backflow and contamination, the temporary connecting pipe must be completely disconnected after completion of filling or periodic replenishing. British Standard 8558 also provides guidance on the prevention of stagnation associated with these temporary connections. The petitioner has also raised the issue of the type of backflows device suitable for these installations, and the standard, as Mr Buckley has referred to earlier, for backflow prevention devices is EN 1717. This standard deals with the means to be used to prevent the pollution of potable water inside premises and the general requirements of protection devices to avoid pollution by backflow. In the National Annex to EN 1717, it's recommended to carry out a risk assessment if using backflow prevention valves to ensure fitness for purpose. It also advises that permission should be sought from the Water Services Authority, and any backflow prevention device should be fit for purpose, manufactured in accordance with the product standards and installed by an experienced plumber or technician. The RGII, the Registered Gas Installers of Ireland, include this guidance in relation to temporary connections to sealed unit circuits or sealed heating circuits in their installation guides for gas heating systems. The oil-fired heating systems associations, such as Offtech, etc., provide comparable guidance, and boiler manufacturers highlight this issue and provide explicit installation rules in their manuals. In terms of legislation covering these and broader issues, the relevant legislation is for water supply is the Water Services Act 2007. Section 54 provides that the owner of a premises shall ensure that the internal distribution system of a premises is sufficient for and maintained in such condition as to ensure that water intended for human consumption meets prescribed quality requirements at the tap or taps used for such purposes. Irish Water has powers to issue notices to direct the owner of a premises to undertake remedial action where there is an issue with the quality of water. In relation to Irish standards, the NSAI has been developing the Irish Code of Practice for Building Standards, Domestic Plumbing and Heating, and as Mr Buckley has explained, this has been out for public consultation and it is now being reviewed. The NSAI committees will review and finalise the proposed Code of Practice for heating systems, hot water systems, cold water systems and, importantly, their interlinkages in the context of the suite of European standards known as EN 806. This will provide Ireland for the first time with a national standard for plumbing and heating. And the Department is very supportive of this work in NSAI. The outcome of the work on the Code of Practice will inform the Department's consideration in any further policy or regulatory proposals that may be necessary in the area. That completes my overview of the existing and proposed regulatory arrangements relevant to the Committee's consideration of this petition, and my colleagues and I look forward to participating further in discussion or answering any questions you may have. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Neary. I just need to indicate, unfortunately, I have to leave at 5 to deal with amendments to legislation in another committee, and one of my colleagues will take over. So I'm just going to ask some of my questions now, and then I'll invite one of my colleagues to take over the chair. Obviously, the issue of regulation of standards is very topical at the moment. We have another significant problem for people who purchased homes, in terms of fire regulations in Longboat Quay here in the city, and there's many other issues across the state. So what comes to my mind is this: if there are European regulations around ensuring that the drinking water in a home is safe, who's responsible for ensuring that these are being implemented? That's my first question. So I'll invite an answer on that.
The European legislation, we have the Irish legislation, the Water Services Act 2007, and that sets the requirements in terms of water supply.
My question is this: you see, I suppose I look at these things simply. I mean, if you have put a house on the market, you're a building developer, or if you're a person who's built your own home and you've sought planning permission, is there somebody who goes to check to make sure that what you've installed in your home, or what your plumber has installed in your home, is actually installed to the appropriate European safe standard?
Well, I suppose traditionally the process is that you apply for permission to connect to the main supply, and that the Water Services Authority then require you to do certain things, and if you fulfil that, you connect to the main supply, and that has been the process. Traditionally, that was through the authority was the local authority, the Water Services Authority, and it was governed under bylaws, and now Irish Water are the national Water Services Authority, and under the Water Services Act 2007 they have a similar process and responsibility and enforcement powers.
It's just my concern is that both yourself, Mr Buckley, and Ms Neary have confirmed today what the petitioner states, is that there is the potential for pollution by backflow if the appropriate installation doesn't take place, and that's obviously a serious concern because it's a public health concern. So I want to establish that obviously is a very serious matter, profoundly serious matter. Who holds either the plumber or the developer to account? Who ensures and says, yes, this house has got a plumbing infrastructure which meets the European or British or Irish standard that ensures that the drinking water in this house is safe and we stand over it? Who is responsible for in every single house in this state ensuring that that is taking place and signing off on that?
Well, I suppose the Water Services Act, again, I suppose comes back to the installation, and what we said in the opening statement was that the Section 54 requires that the owner is responsible for the distribution system within their house and maintaining that, and anything that affects the quality of the water. The Water Services Authority would have powers to request that they take remedial action should there be an issue with the water quality. In this situation, if the guidance is followed, the risk of contamination is extremely low, if at all, because it's a complete disconnection of the pipe once filling has happened or replenishing has happened. So the guidance is very clear, and it's a very simple step and not a very expensive step to take.
Okay, thank you very much. I now invite Trevor, my colleague Senator O'Clougherty is going to take over the chair.
Chair, I have to go as well, so I excuse as well.
No problem at all. Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to invite questions from any of the other members. Deputy Kiss.
Okay, I'd like to welcome visitors here today. I just follow on from what the chairman said. This question of accountability, I think, is very important as to who is actually responsible or dealing with this. And if I could just broaden it out a small bit, there's so many ways now of heating a house, and I think I live in a rural area and I see so many different ways. I mean, in the old days it was just, I suppose, oil was the main fuel, and then that increased in price and people brought in the solid fuel, type arrangements.